Welcome to the UNCCD series on good land stewardship for present and future generations. This series shares stories, news, and conversations about land, desertification, climate change, sustainable development goals, and related environmental issues. Each month, you will hear the best stories from the actors on the land, the scientists, policymakers, stakeholders, and farmers helping to keep our land healthy and productive. The people making sustainable land management real on the ground. During the first webinar on land-based jobs for youth, we had the idea some young people have come up with and created jobs. They talked about how they overcame their fear or procrastination to make a start. And two policymakers also told us what they are doing to help youth to become job creators, not just employees. This follow-up podcast has responses to the questions we never got through during that webinar session. We will hear from Ms. Thato Mokgadi from Botswana, who set up Tsoo 13. If you missed the webinar or would like to listen to it again, you can download it as a recording from our UNCCD YouTube channel or as podcasts using your favorite platform. So welcome back, Thato. Thank you for making the time to speak to us again.
And so these are questions that we got during the webinar and we were not able to get through them. So we thank you for making the time to be able to speak to us about this. So the first question we have is, what would you say would be your top 3 tips for someone launching an agro business and they're moving from the corporate to agro entrepreneurship space?
Thanks, Wagaki, for having me back. I'm glad people had more questions because this is the only way we learn. So for me, I'd say try and run your business as professionally as possible, right? Use what you learned in corporate. Employ organizational structure and all those little learnings. Put organizational structures, put systems in place so that you know how things are supposed to work and why they're supposed to work in a particular way. That's number 1. Number 2, I'd say research the business. Look at the trends of what is going on. When is the best time to have the product that you want to have? When is the worst time to have it? And once you have a product, how quickly does it move, right? Benchmark, go and visit and see as many businesses in your area as possible so that you can adopt best business practice, right? And then number 3, I'd say also be agile, react quickly and effectively to challenges and adopt very quickly to the changing business landscape. That way you're never caught off guard. Your business can adapt quickly to anything that is going on. That is the beauty of small business. Wagaki?
Thank you so much. So I get that. Be professional, be agile. What was the third one? The second one.
I said run as professionally as possible, employ organizational structure and corporate, and use your corporate learnings.
Super. Okay, now related to that, some people wanted to know about staff. What advice can you offer about recruiting staff and making them productive as quickly as possible?
Okay, what I would say is, what I found worked for us is that you must employ professionals as much as possible. There's a lot of people who have gone to school for these things. There's people who are agronomists, there's animal scientists, all sorts of professionals in our business. Employ professionals because it will help you with less loss of production, right? Have a clear working schedules for your workers. I'd also say introduce small perks, small things like lunch, for example. One of the things that I do, because we're in the rural areas, I make sure that people stay over lunch. I provide them a small lunch. This incentivizes them to come to work because, as you know, sometimes in the rural areas, their livelihoods are very small, right?
Right.
Also, we set daily targets. When you set daily targets, you make sure that the work that you expect to be done is done at the time that you expect. The other thing is make your remuneration, your pay, it must align to the type of work that you're giving. And then the last one, I think, would be try and get your staff to specialize in certain tasks. When that happens is that it builds efficiencies. The tasks will be done quicker. As somebody continues to do the same task over and over again, they learn how to do it quickly and effectively.
Lovely. Okay. I think that's easy to follow. In another interview, we were asking one of the speakers, what they would do. And they said, employ local people. and train them? What are the costs and benefits of using each model? And they were saying, don't bring people from the urban area to the rural area, build the capacity within the rural area. And the idea is to shift the dynamics so that people in the urban areas actually want to go back to the rural area. How do you see that for strategy, or why would you not apply it?
I actually do apply it. I like to work with people within the locality for various reasons. One of the reasons is that they know the social norms of the area, right? So you're not going to have that many clashes between different types of people. From when you are coming from town and trying to adapt to working in the rural areas, sometimes there's that social clash. But over and above that, transport, something as little as transport can be very expensive. So if you have somebody who works and lives within the locality, they can just walk to and from work. And also, I think they are more invested in trying to better the area, the village in which they come from.
What you're saying is, even if you employ local people, try and make sure they have some of the skill that you need. So when you say that they're professional, you're not just saying it's local people with the skills that you need.
Yes, that's true. Okay, so there's jobs that are very specialized. For example, if you want an agronomist, the likelihood is that you're not going to get somebody from the area where you live. It would be great if the area where you're running your business, it would be great if that were the case. But with professionals at that level, because of that area of study, they realize and understand that they would be working in a remote area, in a rural area, in a farm setting, for example, right? So what you have to make sure of is that you have skills transfer to your local employees. That is the only way you can build capacity.
Okay, fantastic. So now let's move to the more practical, hands-on, on-the-ground questions. So one of them is, what is precision agriculture? If you can elaborate that a little bit.
The way I understand precision agriculture and how I approach it is that you're using systems and technology to influence your product and output directly, right? I'll give you an example. When you are using drip irrigation, that water will drip directly under the plant that you've planted. It will go straight to the roots. You're not watering and feeding weeds. So it's precise. It goes exactly to where you want it to go. Right. Another example would be in livestock. When you use artificial insemination, right? You are producing the animal with the traits that you want. So you are influencing the product, the end product directly.
Right. Okay. And then so something linked to that that goes into what you just talked about, the water. In regard to hydroponic being used to grow crops in your initiative, what is the cost implication? Is it minimal? Is it high? I mean, and you might want to tell a little bit of a story about how you ended up in hydroponics. How did you finally determine that you wanted to go there?
Okay. So when I started planting open field. But what I quickly realized was that as the years go by, I seem to be getting less and less product at the end of each season. The reason being, with all this climate change, we have harsher summers and colder winters.
Right.
So when I started farming 6 years ago, we used to have, when the temperature is really, really high, for like maybe 4 days, maybe in a month. Now, we're getting almost every 2-3 weeks, the temperatures are in the 40s. So the plants can't survive. Also, what I found was that because I use, I use hybrid seeds. So with hybrid seeds, you find that there's more resistances to different things, some soil-borne diseases and funguses and things like that. Yeah. When the temperatures are consistently high, all these resistances fall away. So I then decided, no, we have always had the plan that we're going to try and go as large scale as possible. We've always wanted to get as technologically advanced within the way we do the farm as possible. But hydroponics is expensive. I won't lie to you there. But that's the initial setup. The initial setup is not cheap. But what we have done is we've innovated systems that that we get from abroad and try to make it more suitable to our environment. For example, people will use hydroponics in a greenhouse, in a glass greenhouse. I can't afford a glass greenhouse. We couldn't afford a glass greenhouse. Right. So we've used shade netting. That still minimizes the impact on the sun on the plants, but it's more, for us, it works better, especially in our pockets. Yeah. So try. So the idea here is to try and use technology, but innovate it to suit the environment that you are in. Whether that environment is influenced by how deep your pocket is, or it's influenced by the terrain that you are in. Because one of the things is that a lot of these highly specialized products and systems that we use, you find that when something breaks down, it's very difficult to get help because we are far from the urban centers.
The reason you had to use the netting, was it to reduce the heat so that the water is not evaporating, or what? I don't get the link between the greenhouse and the hydroponics. Is it the evaporation?
Yes. Okay. So many things happen when you're planting in the open field. You suffer from high evaporation of water. You suffer from leaching. So when you put in your nutrients, they just go deeper into the ground, further than the roots of the plant. Your plants suffer from sun scald and from too much heat. The fruit will actually burn, similar to if you're just out in the sun for too long, how your skin burns. So all of this leads to a reduced quality in your fruits and in your output, right? When we put the shade net does two things. It reduces the intensity of the heat of the sun on the plants. It reduces the evaporation, like you're saying. But also the system that I'm using with hydroponics, because my plants are growing in grow bags, so they don't actually, they're not in the ground. In them being in grow bags, I've lost that problem of leaching of nutrients, because the nutrients only go, the roots are enclosed within this grow bag. So there's no problem of losing nutrients to the soil.
That is a bit of an expensive, but now I understand how that works. To a more general and, let me say, popular question, farming has sustained and provided food to a lot of families, especially in Africa. What advice do you have for those farmers to scale up productivity and also ensure that their farming is sustainable? I think you've done these, from what I understand, you started with half an acre or half a hectare or something like that, and now you're 16 times larger than the way you started. So what advice would you have?
That is true. We started very, very small, and the reason for that is that we wanted to learn our market. We wanted to be sure that when you grow, you know exactly how much output you can take out of your farm and where all this product is going, right? So I would say, don't be too quick to scale. Make sure that when you scale, your market can absorb your produce. And then when you do scale, I would say scale up more in machinery. This will increase your efficiency and it will improve your output. But most importantly, it will reduce staff burnout. Farm work is very labor intensive. It's a very labor intensive job. So you tend to get a lot of staff turnover because people just get tired. They get physically tired. So if you scale up with machinery, you're decreasing the amount of physical labor that your employees have to do. And again, like I said, just be aware of what's happening in the market. If you decide you want to scale up in a particular produce, but you find that half the year, the rest of the country is also selling that produce. For example, cabbages are something that are planted in winter, and you find that most people will plant cabbage in winter and you can't move it. So you have to be aware of what's happening in the market so that you don't grow in a product that is already flooding the market.
Right. And so now, so something linked to that. When you started, did you start with would you advise them that if somebody is trying to figure out what the market is and probably what even the best productivity of their land, the best crop they can grow on their land would be, did you start with just one produce, or did you do 3 and then figure out the market based on 3? How did you end up just with the tomatoes that you did? And I don't want you to, necessarily disclose your company secrets, but just what are the principles? How do you decide, okay, I will grow cabbage, even though cabbage would grow, yes, maybe winter stuff, but did you try 3 other crops, or did you just go to this one?
The single most important thing that I did is that I tested my water and I tested my soil. These are the things, the 2 most important things that will guide you as to what crops you can grow in your soil, right? Because sometimes your soil that you have just isn't suitable, it's too acidic for a particular plant, or it just doesn't have enough nutrients that your particular plant needs, which would mean that you're now going to be spending more and more money in fertilizers trying to correct the soil, right? So that's how I started. I started with testing my soil and testing my water. Once I got that, the test center will be able to tell you these are the most suitable plants that can grow in your area. You look at, again, research. You look at the area what are the rainfall trends in that area? How much water do you have? How much water does the plant that you want to grow need? Things like that. And then once I had done all of that, I did 4 crops, and with varying degrees. One of the things I wanted to do was green pepper, because I personally like green pepper and red peppers. But I found that green pepper and tomatoes come from the same family, so they suffer the same pests and diseases. So it was, which one do I choose? Do I choose the green pepper or do I choose the tomato? So those are the small things that finally brought us down to doing tomato.
Great. So I start by looking at my land, what it can grow. And where did you go? Is it an agricultural center, or what kind of a center did you go to find out what kinds of crops you grow there? You mentioned it, but I missed it.
Well, there's agricultural labs where you can take your water for sampling and your soil for sampling. Sometimes, depending on where you are, you can even work with your local agricultural university. They too can help, which is what happens in Botswana. You can take it to the local agricultural university, and they'll test your samples for you. Failing that, you just use private labs.
So just to take people through what you suggested, so you take your soil samples, you take it to an agricultural center or university where they can test those samples and tell you what kinds of crops are best for your land, and then you would grow a few crops, just a few of the ones that are suggested, to see what does best. And you need to know which of those crops really are in the same family that would tend to have the same problem, so that you don't grow the same crop. After that, you figure out which is you need to figure out which of those crops will do well in the local market for you, where there is probably not much competition, or where there's potential for growth, whatever metrics you use to assess the market. And then that's where you specialize. And then when you start growing, you grow a small area. And then if you need to scale up on the machinery side, on the technology side, to reduce the labor for your staff, and then begin to scale it up like that. So that's the process in a sense.
That's correct. Yes, that's from my point of view. Yes.
No, I think it's good to get it from the people who've done it on the ground, because this is what people want to know. It's almost like when you go to school, you don't start at class 8, you start in class 1 because you build it up, right?
And that is true. And, agribusiness is a hard business. I won't lie to you with that. It's a hard business, and it takes a long time for the business to find its feet. So if you can have some sort of mentor or somebody who's willing to share with you what gone through, to avoid you going through the same pitfalls, you really should take that up.
That's absolutely fantastic, because the next webinar is going to be about financing, and Jacob was there and talked a little bit about financing. And the second aspect of that webinar is going to be about mentorship, because I think we don't emphasize that enough. And in our professional jobs, we kind of have mentors, but probably not in the agricultural sector. And I wonder what you can say, if you can speak just a little bit about that as a teaser to what we're going to listen to later. Who were your mentors and how did you identify them?
If you remember at the beginning of the conversation, I mentioned a lot about benchmarking. So what I did, I really went and tried to find as many farmers who are large scale as possible and made connections with them. And even from, not directly from a farming perspective, even just other business people, because business is business, it has ups and downs, to help me just navigate the business landscape. In terms of financing, I would say, our financial institutions need to be patient. You need, when you're going for financing, find a financier who is patient. And in being patient, I mean that they'll give you a grace period maybe before you have to start paying back your loan, for example. They understand that agribusinesses take a long time to find their feet. So a good place to look for funding would be development banks or government. Those would be great primary financiers.
Right.
And then when you do look for finance, target your finance towards buying equipment and implements and structures as well as working capital, because these are the things that will really trip you out in the end, because maybe you'll grow, but once you grow, now having the equipment to allow you to process your goods quickly, you spend so much time harvesting and cleaning that by the time the truck is here to come and collect, you're still not ready because your equipment is not up to standard. And then I truly believe in mentorship. I think financing should come with as part of the finance, there should be mentorship.
Well, that was a question from one of our readers. After you've scaled up, is it possible for one to have support afterwards? And I mean, have you found it easy to get support from institutions or mentors? Are people that willing to do it?
That one is two-sided, because we in Botswana, like I said before, our population is very, very small. We're only about 2 million. So the competition is quite high. So you might find that finding a mentor within the agribusiness, particularly if supposing in the horticultural space, might be difficult, but you can maybe find a mentor who is in a similar business as you. Maybe they are doing livestock or any other sort of business. So no, finding mentors isn't always easy. And a big part of that as well is because people want to see that you're serious about your business. You're really serious. You don't just come there and want answers from them. When you're just waking up and going there and say, but today, I want to talk to the bank and the bank doesn't want to give me money. Can you give me money? Sort of thing. Your mentor is not there to give you all the answers. Your mentor is there to help you work through your problems and find possible solutions.
Right. So one last question that was an outlier, just from a young person who said, okay, I already have the fields. How does a young Senegalese agribusiness entrepreneur be financed? What would you say to that?
I'd say financiers, our financiers are very skittish when it comes to agribusiness. They see agribusiness as too risky, as very, very risky, because anything can happen with agribusiness, right? So I would say don't be quick to take people's money. Don't be quick to get a loan, because you might find yourself stuck with paying every little penny that you're making is going towards paying back the loan, and you're not actually growing your agricultural business. What you can do is start small, sell and save. If you have family maybe that can chip in, that sort of thing. But personally, I believe that, you want to take financing and loans as far into the business as you possibly can. A lot of governments will have little incentives. Like for us in Botswana, we have different schemes where government will give out seeds as a way to help subsidize our living. Maybe you can start off with those, just like a small little space, grow what you grow, sell it, save that money, plow it back into the business and carry on in that way.
Right. Wow. Thank you so much, Thato. That was really wonderful. And I think we've covered all the questions that we needed to cover in terms of the follow-up that was sent to you. And we just really appreciate your availability and willingness to share your knowledge and experience and expertise with young people from Africa that really want to, and not just from Africa, I'd say even from Asia and Latin America that want to start their work. So we really appreciate your time and thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me as well. You know, these sort of forums help all of us, because I also listen to these forums and I get to learn from other experts and other people through the experiences of other people. So thank you for hosting these events for us.
Right. Thank you so much. We've had a lot of interest from people, and we'll see in the end, by the way, in case you find people that are, interested in working with you and that are working with you and that got inspired as a result of this webinar, please let us know. We'd always like to also feature them and encourage them and affirm them, because I think that's the one thing that we can offer.
Oh, that would be great. Yes. No, definitely. I'll do that.
Okay. Thank you so much and have a good...
Thanks, Agagi.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.